Welcome to Stifel's Sightlines podcast, focusing each week on a topic or two important to investors.
Well, greetings and welcome to the Sightlines podcast. This is Michael O'Keefe, Stifel's Chief Investment Officer. I want to get into some possibly sort of longer term or sort of second order effects of the supply shocks from the Iran conflict. So obviously when something like this happens and we see a shock in commodities, things like that, the first thing we focus on are the immediate price movements of those commodities and other goods, maybe shipping costs or gas at the pump, things that are really measurable and can be understood right away. And that's all really important. But when we think about this type of thing and how the economy works, there's essentially this idea that these are really also basically inputs to other things, right? So think of it as when a supply shock occurs, these begin upstream in sort of raw materials, components, and industrial inputs that are at the start of a longer term production chain. And so I want to get into sort of what some of the effects might be when it comes to the Iran conflict itself. And so let's jump into it a little bit. And what I would say is obviously the Strait of Hormuz, that being closed, the disruption to the flow, sort of the ship traffic, obviously it has an effect on seaborne oil and other petrochemical products, but there's other things like fertilizer, helium, et cetera, that's been affected. And so, when you think about petrochemicals, for example, essentially these are inputs to things like other chemicals, plastics, synthetic rubber, paints, resins, other industrial materials. And so all of that can be disrupted, and all the way that those things are used can be impacted down the road. So, we're talking food distribution, we're talking medical devices, safety equipment, auto parts, industrial components, electronics, everyday goods, like stuff can be affected. It just takes time for that to happen. So we know, as an example, we should expect some strain around hospital goods, for example, think tubes and sterile packaging and things like that. Interestingly, helium is an input to semiconductors. It's used in healthcare. There's sort of controlled atmospheres and leak detection and welding. There are all kinds of applications. So to the degree there's a helium shortage, that will have an effect on those things. Now, one item that's talked about a lot is fertilizer. So fertilizer supply is being disrupted, which, when you think about that, to say it very simply, that can later impact the output of crops and the food supply generally, and therefore food prices. And again, that can take a while for that to sort of make its way into the system. So when it comes to liquefied gases, again, plastics, agriculture, chemicals, and down the road, the potential for challenges obviously with heating, cooking, transportation. There's been worry about aluminum shortages. That's packaging, construction, machinery, also transportation. And I guess a final comment to say about this is we can think of it certainly in terms of inflation, but also it ends up disrupting businesses, basically. So finished goods are affected, earnings can be affected, margins related can be affected. And so, again, I think the spirit of this is just to say, look, we have to take inventory and what's going on when it comes to all these sort of initial inputs to the way the economy works. And we have to be mindful of the possibility of these shortages and their effects on the economy generally, but also on specific investments, specific companies, margins, earnings, et cetera. Anyway, that's the concept I wanted to share in this shorter episode of the Sightlines podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen, and we look forward to delivering more good content in the future. Thanks so much.
Thanks again for listening to Stifel's Sightlines. Be sure to subscribe wherever you're listening to automatically receive each week's podcast in your feed.